The microphone shrieked across the grand ballroom just before Donovan Pierce destroyed his pregnant wife on live television. 5 minutes earlier, Camille had been happy. She stood near the ice sculptures in the center of the Grand Biltmore Hotel. The towering swans dripped cold water onto the imported linen tablecloths. A string quartet played a slow, classical melody in the corner. Waiters in white tuxedo jackets carried silver trays of caviar and crystal champagne flutes through the crowd. 500 members of Atlanta's legal elite packed the room from wall to wall. Camille rubbed her thumb in slow circles over her cream silk maternity gown. The fabric clung to the heavy, low curve of her 8-month pregnancy. The marble floor radiated a chill straight through the thin leather soles of her Louboutins. She pressed her right palm flat against the tight drum of her belly. Leo kicked against her hand, a hard, rolling movement. "He is restless tonight," Camille said. She leaned her head against Donovan's shoulder. Donovan checked his Rolex. He did not look at her stomach. "It is a big night," Donovan said. He adjusted the lapels of his midnight navy Tom Ford suit, the suit she had watched him choose for 40 minutes the morning of their first anniversary. "Stay by the velvet curtains. I want you in the frame when the cameras turn." He kissed her forehead. He tasted like expensive scotch and peppermint. He walked away. Camille moved to the shadows of the heavy velvet stage curtains. She found her place. She waited to watch her husband announce his campaign for district attorney. Donovan stepped up to the mahogany podium. He flashed his trademark predatory smile at the sea of reporters. Victoria Vance stood 2 feet to his right. She wore a crimson Oscar de la Renta sheath dress that pooled around her ankles like fresh blood. 4 thick gold bangles clanked against her dark wrists every time she shifted her weight. As the presiding district judge, she commanded the room without opening her mouth. She smirked at the front row of journalists. Her diamond necklace caught the strobe lights. She leaned toward Donovan. Their shoulders brushed. In the back of the press pit, Elias Thorne noticed the contact. Elias adjusted the telephoto lens on his professional camera. He wore a faded brown corduroy jacket that made him a sore thumb against the sea of tailored tuxedos. He was the lead investigative journalist for the Atlanta Chronicle. He trusted nobody in this room. He clicked the shutter. He captured the subtle, intimate drag of Victoria's red fingernail against the cuff of Donovan's jacket. Donovan tapped the microphone. The shriek of feedback cut through the ballroom. The crowd went dead silent. "We are here today to witness a historic shift in the justice system of Atlanta." Donovan's voice boomed through the overhead speakers. It was rich, practiced, and coated in courtroom charm. He commanded the air. He owned the attention of every breathing body in the space. "For the past decade, I have fought for truth in the courtrooms of this great city. I have built my firm on the bedrock of integrity. I have stood before the finest judges, including the Honorable Judge Vance here, to ensure that the law remains untainted by corruption, by greed, and by falsehoods." He gripped the edges of the mahogany podium. His knuckles turned lighter against his dark skin. "I have defended the innocent. I have prosecuted the guilty in the court of public opinion. I have carried the burden of leadership on my shoulders. A lawyer's duty is to the truth, and the truth, my friends, is heavy." Donovan paused. He looked down at his polished wingtip shoes. He let out a long, heavy, theatrical sigh. He played the crowd like a grand piano. "But a man cannot clean up his city if his own house is infected." Camille stopped breathing. Her fingers curled into the cream silk covering her stomach. Donovan turned his head. He looked directly at the velvet curtains. He pointed his finger right at her face. Camera lenses pivoted in unison. Flashes blinded her. The heat of the spotlights hit her cheeks. "My wife, Camille, is a sick woman." A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. The clinking of silverware stopped. Mental illness is a brutal thief. It steals the vibrant, supportive person you married and leaves behind a paranoid, delusional shell. I have spent 3 long years trying to save her. I have paid for the finest private clinics in the country. I have exhausted every financial and emotional resource to keep her stable. I have sacrificed my own peace to hide her madness from the world. He shook his head, looking back at the reporters with a face carved in sorrow. Instead of seeking the medical treatment she needs, she has decided to fabricate vile, defamatory lies. She has spent the last month spreading disgusting rumors about my professional relationship with Judge Vance. She has tried to ruin the reputation of the most brilliant legal mind in this city just to feed her own paranoid delusions. Camille stared at the man she had loved since law school. He was executing her character on live television. He was using his legendary courtroom theatrics to turn her into a monster. He built a cage of words and locked her inside it while 500 people watched. Victoria stepped forward. Her heavy gold jewelry rattled against the wood of the podium. "It is a tragedy to watch a woman lose her mind, Donovan. We only wish her healing." Victoria smiled. The smile did not reach her dark, calculating eyes. She reached out and touched Donovan's shoulder again. It was an intimate, possessive gesture broadcast to every news station in the state. "I have dedicated my life to the integrity of the law," Victoria said, her voice dripping with rehearsed sympathy. "I have fought too hard to build a fair and balanced courtroom. I will not let her unhinged delusions infect my jurisdiction. Or your flawless career, Mr. Pierce. The public deserves better." Donovan nodded. He leveled his gaze back at his pregnant wife. "I am filing for divorce this morning. I am filing for sole physical and legal custody of my unborn son. She is unfit to mother. She is unfit to stand in public. She is unfit to bear my name a single day longer. I will not allow a deranged woman to raise a Pierce." Pens scratched across notepads. Camera shutters sounded like machine gun fire. Camille did not scream. She did not cry. She lifted her chin. She stared into Donovan's eyes with a silence that swallowed the noise of the room. Her left hand clamped down harder over her son. Her silence unnerved him. She could see the slight twitch in his jaw. She offered him no tears. She offered him no reaction. In the back of the press pit, Elias checked his secondary device. He adjusted the gain dial on his professional audio recorder. The digital levels on his screen bounced deep into the red zone. He had arrived an hour early to bypass the hotel's public relations team. He had planted a lavalier microphone taped beneath the mahogany podium. He wore his heavy monitoring headphones. Through the padded ear cups, Elias heard the raw, unedited audio captured 10 minutes before the press conference began. "Make sure security tosses her out the front doors, not the back. I want the cameras to catch her crying." Donovan's voice, cold and sharp. "She's gonna look like a fat, hysterical cow. Don't hold back, baby. Ruin her." Victoria's voice, followed by the wet sound of a kiss and the clink of champagne flutes. Elias pressed the save button on his device. He pulled his camera up to his eye. He zoomed in on Camille's face. He captured her stoic, unbreakable posture. He said nothing. He recorded everything. At the front of the room, Donovan waved his hand toward the exit. "Security, please escort this woman off the premises. She is trespassing on a private event." Two men in heavy black suits stepped out from behind the velvet curtains. They wore transparent earpieces. They did not look at her face. They only saw a problem to be removed from the venue. "Donovan, you are making a mistake." Camille's voice was quiet. It lacked the theatrical projection of her husband's, but it carried a strange, heavy weight. It traveled through the silence of the room. Donovan laughed. The sound echoed off the crystal chandeliers and bounced across the grand room. "The only mistake I made was picking up a nobody from the suburbs and trying to turn her into a Pierce. You brought nothing to this marriage. You have no money, you have no connections, you have no class. You are nothing. Take her out." The guards grabbed Camille. Thick fingers dug into the delicate cream silk covering her upper arms. They pulled her backward with brutal force. She gasped. The sudden movement pulled at the round ligaments in her lower abdomen. Her heel caught on the thick edge of the plush red carpet. She stumbled. She dropped to her knees on the hard floor. The impact sent a sharp, terrifying jolt up her spine. She curled her body forward. She threw both arms over her stomach to shield her baby from the fall. Her breathing turned ragged. She rested her cheek against the cold floor. She lay on the cold marble for a long moment, both hands pressed flat against her belly, listening for any sign that Leo had survived the shock. The tile smelled of floor wax and spilled champagne. The grout line pressed into her cheekbone. "Careful, gentlemen." Victoria leaned into the microphone, her red lips curved into a wicked sneer. "We wouldn't want her faking a medical emergency for sympathy." Hysterical women love to play the victim when they run out of lies. Laughter rippled through the front row of junior partners. Donovan turned his back to his wife. He reached out. He placed his hand over Victoria's ring-heavy fingers resting on the podium. He stroked her knuckles in plain view of the cameras. "Next question," Donovan said. Camille knelt on the cold marble. The journalists swarmed past her. They stepped over the long train of her cream dress to get closer to the podium. Expensive leather shoes clipped her shins. A heavy nylon camera strap smacked against her shoulder. Nobody offered her a hand. Nobody asked if the baby was safe. They treated her like a discarded prop on a theater stage. She squeezed her eyes shut for one brief second. She felt the heavy, firm kick of her son against her lower ribs. She did not lower her chin. She watched them celebrate. She forced herself to stand. She turned away from the stage. She walked out unseen. The heavy oak doors opened. The heavy oak doors clicked shut. The brass latch engaged with a sharp, metallic finality. The muffled bass of the string quartet vibrating through the thick mahogany was the only proof that her old life still existed on the other side. Camille stood alone in the empty service corridor of the Grand Biltmore Hotel. The ringing in her ears pitched higher, mimicking the shriek of Donovan's microphone, drowning out the ambient hum of the central air conditioning. Flashes of blinding white strobe light still burned, neon after images into the back of her retinas. She blinked. The spots multiplied. Her knees burned. The impact against the ballroom marble radiated a dull, throbbing heat up through her femurs. The delicate cream silk of her maternity gown clung to her damp skin. A jagged tear marred the fabric right above her left knee, exposing a bruised, scraped patch of skin. She pressed her right shoulder against the gold-flocked damask wallpaper. Her chest heaved. Her lungs fought for air in the suffocating silence. Both hands flattened over the tight, low drum of her 8-month pregnancy. Leo kicked. The movement was sharp, frantic, and bruising against her lower ribs. She closed her eyes, letting the freezing temperature of the wallpaper seep through her dress and cool the feverish heat rising in her neck. She tracked the erratic, rolling movements of her son beneath her palms. He felt the spike in her heart rate. He absorbed the rushing cortisol flooding her bloodstream. The baby was all that mattered. She pushed off the wall. Her left Louboutin heel wobbled on the thick, patterned wool runner, stretching down the endless hallway. She forced her weight forward. She walked. Every step sent a jagged spike of pain shooting through her round ligaments. She pressed her jaw shut. She clamped her molars together until the joints popped. The corridor smelled of lemon floor polish, expensive cigar smoke, and the faint metallic tang of her own bitten lip. Brass wall sconces cast long, distorted shadows across the carpet. She focused her eyes on the illuminated exit sign suspended at the far end of the tunnel. Why? 300 yards away, she dragged her torn hem across the wool fibers. Donovan's voice chased her. His theatrical, booming baritone vibrated in the marrow of her bones. The memory surfaced without warning. She is unfit to mother. Her fingers dug deeper into the cream silk, covering her belly. She shielded Leo from the ghost of his father's words. She walked past a row of towering mirrors lining the corridor. She caught her own reflection. Pale skin, smudged mascara, a ruined dress. Donovan saw a weak, delusional casualty. He saw a suburban nobody he could crush beneath the heel of his ambition. Camille kept walking. The physical agony in her lower back flared with every heavy footfall. She had spent 4 years playing the role he assigned her. She had buried her maiden name. She had hidden the sterling empire behind a modest checking account and a quiet demeanor. She wanted a man who loved her for her mind, not a sycophant chasing her father's shadow. He found a shark. She married a predator who mistook her silence for weakness. The air grew colder. The plush wool runner gave way to scuffed industrial gray linoleum. The opulent gold-flocked wallpaper transitioned into bare, cinder-block walls painted a sterile, institutional white. The service elevator doors loomed ahead, dented and smeared with dark fingerprints. Donovan glared at the retreating guards, his voice bleeding through the hot microphone. "I didn't marry a woman, Victoria. I rented a womb from a suburban nobody, and her lease expired at 8 months." She hit the down button. The metal doors parted. She stepped inside the rattling metal box. The descent pulled her stomach into her throat. The doors slid open to the VIP subterranean parking garage. The drop in temperature hit her bare arms like a physical blow. The air smelled of unleaded gasoline, damp concrete, and the lingering ozone of hot tire rubber. Fluorescent tube lights buzzed overhead, flickering and casting a sickly green pallor over the rows of luxury vehicles. Camille stumbled out of the elevator bay. Her vision blurred, the gray concrete floor tilted upward. She aimed for the closest concrete support pillar, dragging her fingertips along the rough, painted yellow cinder blocks to keep her balance. Her knees gave out. She collapsed onto the cold cement parking bumper, marking an empty, reserved space. The chill of the damp concrete bit straight through the thin silk of her dress. She pulled her knees together. She wrapped both arms tight around her stomach, curling her upper body forward to create a protective shell over Leo. Her hands shook. The tremor started in her fingertips and radiated up her forearms, relentless and unstoppable. Her teeth chattered. A cold, clammy sweat broke out across her forehead, matting her dark hair against her temples. The shock was setting in, draining the blood from her extremities, leaving her shivering in the cavernous, echoing concrete tomb beneath the hotel. She stared at the puddle of oily water gathering near the toe of her shoe. The memory surfaced without warning. "Take her out!" His command echoed off the cement walls. The man she had slept beside for 4 years. The man who had kissed her stomach 3 hours ago and whispered promises against her skin. He had reduced her to a trespasser. He had weaponized her pregnancy for a polling boost. He traded his own child for the favor of a judge in a crimson dress. Footsteps echoed in the distance. Not the sharp, aggressive click of leather wingtips. A heavy, deliberate scuff, rubber soles dragging against the gritty concrete. Camille squeezed her eyes shut. She buried her face into the curve of her shoulder. She tightened her grip on her belly. She prepared for the hotel security guards. She prepared for the rough, bruising grip of thick fingers on her upper arms. She waited for the final, humiliating toss onto the Atlanta pavement. The footsteps stopped. A shadow fell over her. Camille did not look up. She kept her chin tucked. The scent of stale black coffee, wet wool, and developing chemicals washed over her. A heavy, warm weight dropped onto her shivering shoulders. She flinched. The fabric was thick and rough against her bare arms. It was a faded brown corduroy jacket. The residual body heat trapped in the lining began thawing the ice locked in her collarbones. Camille raised her head. A man crouched 3 feet away. He wore a wrinkled blue button-down shirt with rolled-up sleeves. His dark eyes were calm, observant, and devoid of the predatory gleam she had seen in the ballroom. A heavy camera rested against his chest, the black nylon strap digging into the worn collar of his shirt. He did not offer a rehearsed, hollow apology. He did not ask the patronizing questions people ask when they want to feel good about themselves. He did not ask if she was hurt. He reached into the side pocket of his worn canvas messenger bag. He pulled out an unopened bottle of water. He set it on the cold concrete parking bumper, 2 inches from her thigh. Camille stared at the clear plastic bottle. Moisture beaded on the outside plastic. The man reached into his breast pocket. He extracted a thick, textured white business card. He held it out. His hand was steady. His fingernails were clipped short. Black ink stained the side of his thumb. Camille uncurled her right hand from her stomach. Her fingers trembled as she pinched the edge of the card. Elias Thorne, lead investigative journalist, The Atlanta Chronicle. Below his printed title, a direct cell phone number was scrawled in black ballpoint pen. She looked back up at his face. Elias met her gaze. He gave a single, slow nod. The gesture was a silent acknowledgement of the war she had just survived. He knew what she was. He knew what Donovan was. He knew what had just been captured on the hot microphone beneath the mahogany podium. He possessed the weapon she needed. He stood up. He lifted the heavy canvas strap over his shoulder. He turned his back. Elias Thorne walked away into the maze of parked luxury cars, his rubber soles fading into the ambient hum of the garage ventilation fans. He left her alone in the subterranean shadows. Camille looked at the small white rectangle resting in her palm. The crisp edges of the car dug into her skin. She traced the raised black ink of his name with her thumb. A slow, heavy kick rolled across her lower abdomen. Leo was awake. Leo was fighting. She placed her left hand flat against the tight drum of her stomach. The trembling in her fingers slowed. The frantic shaking in her chest began to subside, replaced by a cold, anchoring weight settling at the base of her spine. Victoria Vance wanted her ruined. Donovan Pierce wanted her erased. They wanted a hysterical, weeping casualty dragged out into the flashing cameras of the local news affiliates. They wanted a shattered woman begging for scraps of her own dignity. They expected her to crawl back to their suburban estate, pack a small suitcase, and disappear into the footnotes of Donovan's political ascension. They believed she was a nobody. They believed she had no money, no connections, and no power. They forgot her father. Camille slipped the business card into the small silk pocket of her torn clutch. She picked up the plastic water bottle. She unscrewed the white cap. She drank, letting the freezing liquid wash away the metallic taste of fear coating her tongue. The water shocked her system. It woke her up. She screwed the cap back on. She placed both hands on the cold concrete parking bumper. She pushed her weight forward. Her injured knee screamed in protest. Her torn ligaments burned like dry fire. She stood up. The brown corduroy jacket slipped from her shoulders. She caught it. She folded the heavy fabric over her forearm. She smoothed the ruined, torn cream silk over the heavy curve of her child. She adjusted her posture. She pulled her shoulders back. She lifted her chin, staring out across the empty expanse of the subterranean garage. The flickering fluorescent lights caught the hard, flat determination settling into her dark eyes. The tears drying on her cheeks would be the last ones Donovan Pierce ever earned. She would not beg for her son. She would not scream into the cameras. She would not waste a single word on the man who had just dug his own grave. Her silence would be the only warning he received. She turned toward the concrete ramp. Wow! She stepped into the dark. Far above the concrete garage, the victory continued. A different world awaited. The heavy double doors of the Biltmore presidential suite clicked shut. The brass deadbolt slid into the strike plate with a loud metallic thud. Donovan threw his head back. He laughed. The sound erupted from his chest, raw and unrestricted, bouncing off the vaulted ceilings and sinking into the plush fibers of the imported Persian rug. He walked over to the sprawling mahogany wet bar. He shrugged off his midnight navy Tom Ford jacket, tossing the expensive wool over the back of a tufted leather armchair. He loosened his silk tie. He unfastened the top 2 buttons of his tailored shirt. Did you see her face? He reached for a chilled bottle of vintage Dom Perignon resting in a silver ice bucket. Condensation dripped down the green glass, pooling on the polished wood. She looked like a deer staring into the headlights of a semi-truck. Not a single tear, not a single word of defense. She just stood there, gripping that massive belly like I was going to reach across the podium and snatch the kid right out of her. Victoria peeled the crimson fabric of her Oscar de la Renta dress away from her damp skin. She sank onto the center of the ivory velvet sofa. 4 thick gold bangles clanked against the glass coffee table as she kicked off her stilettos. The sharp scent of her Tom Ford Black Orchid perfume filled the enclosed space, masking the delicate aroma of the fresh white lilies arranged in a crystal vase on the mantel. She always lacked a spine, Donovan. I expected a scene. I expected a hysterical woman throwing champagne glasses and screaming about her vows. Instead, she just crumbled onto the marble like a discarded napkin. Donovan popped the cork. The pressurized snap echoed through the expansive suite. Foam bubbled over the lip of the bottle, spilling over his knuckles. She is weak. She has always been weak. That is why I married her in the first place. He poured the golden liquid into 2 tall Waterford crystal flutes. He carried the glasses across the expansive living area. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed the glittering, sprawling grid of downtown Atlanta. He handed 1 flute to Victoria. He did not sit down. He paced the length of the Persian rug, fueled by the adrenaline of his own performance. I needed a blank canvas for my early career. A quiet, unassuming suburban girl who wouldn't outshine me at firm dinners. She played her part. But a man aiming for the district attorney's office cannot drag a nameless housewife to the governor's mansion. The public wants a power couple. They want 2 titans. He stopped pacing. He gestured toward Victoria with his champagne glass. They want you. Victoria traced the rim of her crystal flute with a long, crimson fingernail. Her dark eyes tracked his movements with calculating precision. She did not drink. She rested the glass on her bare thigh. They want a tragedy first. Your narrative was flawless down there. The heartbroken husband fighting to save his deranged wife. The heroic attorney protecting his unborn son from a mentally unstable mother. The press pit swallowed it whole. Donovan smirked. He took a long, slow sip of the cold champagne. The legal machine is already in motion. I do not leave loose ends. He walked back toward the mahogany bar, resting his free hand on the cool, polished wood. He commanded the room. He spoke with the rhythmic, hypnotic cadence he used to dismantle expert witnesses on the stand. I wired the last $3 million from our joint accounts into a Shell LLC in the Cayman Islands yesterday afternoon. The Buckhead estate was deeded to a corporate trust last month. She has no access to the firm's capital. She has no credit cards in her own name. She does not have the liquid cash to buy a bus ticket out of this city, let alone hire a litigator capable of stepping into a courtroom against me. Victoria adjusted her posture. The gold bangles rattled again, a harsh, metallic sound cutting through the quiet luxury of the suite. And the custody block? Airtight. Donovan set his glass down. He tapped his index finger against the wood, counting off his maneuvers. Dr. Aris forged the psychological evaluation 3 days ago. He diagnosed her with severe perinatal psychosis. He cited paranoia, erratic behavior, and a history of unprovoked hostility. Judge Miller owes me his seat on the bench. He signed the emergency ex parte order 20 minutes before we walked down to the ballroom. Camille lost legal and physical custody of Leo before she even put on her dress tonight. Victoria smiled. The expression did not reach her eyes. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her bare knees. You have isolated the asset. You have secured the child. You have ruined the mother. Now, we discuss my retainer. Donovan crossed his arms over his chest. He looked down at the woman in the red dress. You are already the presiding district judge. I want equity. Her voice dropped an octave. It lost the rehearsed sympathy she had projected to the cameras. It hardened into cold, transactional steel. I handed you a clear runway to the district attorney's office. I stood on that stage and legitimized your divorce. I risked a judicial ethics inquiry to validate your narrative. I will not be your secret mistress waiting in a leased condo for late-night visits. I want a 30% equity stake in Pierce and Associates. Donovan's jaw tightened. The vein along his temple pulsed against his dark skin. 30% is senior partner territory. I am a senior partner in this relationship. Victoria picked up her phone from the glass coffee table. The screen illuminated her face. She read a short, 3-line text message. Her crimson lips curved into a sharp, genuine smirk. She pressed the side button, locking the screen, and placed the device face down on the velvet cushion beside her hip. I want the equity. I want a public engagement the moment the ink dries on your divorce decree, and I want the corner office overlooking Peachtree Street. Donovan stared at her. He studied the rigid set of her shoulders, the arrogant tilt of her chin, the absolute certainty radiating from her posture. He loved the greed. He fed on the ambition. She was a mirror reflecting his own ruthless hunger. You demand a steep price for your loyalty, Victoria. I am offering you an empire. Empires require an investment. She rested her left hand over the smooth, flat crimson fabric covering her stomach. She held his gaze. I went to the private clinic in Buckhead this morning. I skipped the courtroom recess. I waited for the blood test results. Donovan froze. The muscles in his neck went rigid. We are having a child, Donovan, a real Pierce. The air in the suite vanished. Donovan stared at the flat plane of her stomach. A slow, predatory smile broke across his face, revealing his bright white teeth. He let out a breathless, triumphant laugh. He turned his back to her. He walked to the silver ice bucket. He reached for the heavy green bottle of Dom Perignon. A new heir, a child born to a queen, not a peasant. While his back was turned, Victoria lifted the Waterford crystal flute. She did not hesitate. She tilted her head back. She swallowed the cold, bubbling alcohol in 3 long, rapid gulps. She lowered the empty glass to the coffee table just as Donovan spun back around holding the bottle. He did not notice the empty glass. He did not notice the absence of celebration in her eyes. He poured another round for himself, overflowing his flute. The champagne spilled onto the Persian rug. He did not care about the stain. He possessed enough money to buy the entire hotel wing. This changes the timeline, Donovan said. He paced toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. He looked down at the sprawling city. Tiny red taillights crawled along the distant highways like blood moving through veins. He owned this city. He controlled the pulse of the justice system. He pulled his sleek black smartphone from his trouser pocket. He navigated to his contacts. He pressed the name of his senior associate. He held the phone to his ear, listening to the dial tone ring through the silent suite. Marcus. Donovan's voice dropped its celebratory pitch. He slipped back into his courtroom cadence, cold, dictatorial, unforgiving. File the motion to freeze the joint checking accounts. Yes, right now. I do not care what time it is. Wake the bank manager if you have to. Cancel her platinum cards. Call the security firm guarding the Buckhead estate. Change the gate codes, change the front door locks. If she shows up at the property, have her arrested for criminal trespassing. He listened to the tinny voice on the other end of the line. No, she takes nothing. No clothes, no jewelry. Tell the hospital administration at Emory that she is a flight risk. Put private security outside her maternity ward the moment she goes into labor. Nobody enters that room without my written authorization. When the boy is born, you hand her the severance paperwork and you take him. He ended the call. He did not wait for Marcus to confirm. He dropped the phone onto the mahogany bar. He walked over to the massive, ornate gold leaf mirror hanging on the far wall. He stared at his own reflection. He admired the flawless cut of his Tom Ford trousers, the broad span of his shoulders, the unbothered calm resting in his dark eyes. He had dismantled a life in under 10 minutes. He had secured a dynasty. He raised the crystal flute. He had already won the war. Dawn broke over the Atlanta skyline, casting long, sharp shadows across the floor-to-ceiling glass of the Pierce & Associates boardroom. Donovan stood at the head of the 20-foot slab of polished black marble. 6 senior partners sat in high-backed leather chairs, their expensive tailored suits blending into the dark mahogany paneling of the room. The air smelled of bitter espresso, expensive cologne, and the ozone of the humming laser printer. Victoria sat at the opposite end of the table. She wore a crimson silk blouse that mirrored the color of fresh arterial blood. She sipped a glass of imported sparkling water. The heavy gold bangles on her dark wrist clanked against the polished marble as she rested her hand over her own flat stomach. She watched Donovan work. The Buckhead estate locks were changed at 3 o'clock in the morning. Marcus slid a thick stack of manila folders across the smooth marble. He tapped the top page with a heavy gold Mont Blanc pen. Her personal checking, the joint savings, and the firm expense accounts are frozen. The Platinum American Express was declined 10 minutes ago at a gas station on Peachtree. We dispatched a private tow company to recover the Range Rover. The jewelry? Victoria asked. Idea. Her voice was smooth, pouring like warm honey over the brutal mechanics of the asset strip. She adjusted a diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist. The safe deposit box at Chase Bank was emptied at dawn, Marcus answered, nodding to the judge. The diamond engagement ring, the tennis bracelets, the pearl necklaces, all secured in a private vault under Pierce LLC. Donovan did not look at Marcus. He stared out the window, watching the morning traffic clog the interstate below. He commanded an army of legal predators. He orchestrated the erasure of a human being before his morning coffee cooled. The life insurance policies? Donovan asked. Beneficiary status revoked, Marcus replied. All liquid assets sit in the offshore Cayman LLC. We executed the transfer before the banks opened. She has access to zero capital. The hospital? Emory administration received the ex parte custody order, Marcus said. He flipped to the next document. They flagged her patient file. If she attempts to check into the private maternity wing, security will isolate her in the public waiting area. Donovan turned away from the glass. He paused outside the frosted glass of his private office. His hand hovered over the brass doorknob, remembering the soft, quiet warmth of her breathing beside him in the dark. He did not turn the handle. He let his arm drop. He walked toward the boardroom where Victoria waited. He took the pen from Marcus. He signed his name 3 times in rapid, jagged strokes. The ink dried on the final injunction. Across the waking city, his wife kept moving. She fought for her survival. She had walked 2 miles in the dark before a city transit driver let her board a northbound bus for free. The automatic sliding doors of Emory University Hospital parted. A blast of sterile, freezing air hit Camille's face. The lobby smelled of bleach, stale cafeteria coffee, and the sharp chemical tang of industrial hand sanitizer. She dragged her ruined left Louboutin across the scuffed linoleum. The delicate cream silk of her maternity gown hung in shredded ribbons around her bruised, swollen knee. Dried mud caked the edges of her torn hem. She pressed both hands under the heavy, tight weight of her 8-month pregnancy. Leo rolled against her right palm. The movement was sluggish. The adrenaline that had kept her upright in the hotel parking garage was fading, leaving behind a hollow, throbbing ache in her lower spine. She needed a fetal monitor. She needed to hear the rapid, galloping rhythm of her son's heartbeat to prove the fall had not killed him. She needed a doctor to tell her the sharp, localized pain radiating through her pelvis was just round ligament strain, not placental abruption. She limped toward the glowing admission desk. Her shadow stretched long and distorted across the polished white floors. A woman holding a newborn baby in the waiting area stared at her. A resident physician in blue scrubs paused in the hallway, his eyes tracking the dry blood on her shin. Camille kept her chin up. She ignored the stares. She focused on the glowing blue sign above the main desk. The triage nurse did not look up from her glowing monitor. She chewed on the plastic end of a blue ballpoint pen. Name and date of birth: Camille Pierce, October 12th. The nurse typed. The rhythmic clacking of the plastic keys echoed in the cavernous, empty lobby. The typing stopped. The nurse blinked, her brow furrowed behind thin, wire-rimmed glasses. She clicked the mouse twice. She looked up. Her eyes dropped to the jagged tear in Camille's cream silk dress, then to the smudged mascara beneath her dark eyes. "I need a secondary form of identification, Mrs. Pierce, and a credit card for the triage copay." Camille reached into her torn silk clutch. Her fingers brushed against the thick, textured business card Elias Thorne had given her. She pushed it aside. She pulled out her Platinum American Express and her Georgia driver's license. She laid them flat on the raised counter. The nurse swiped the card. The terminal beeped a sharp, angry red tone. She swiped it again. Same harsh tone. Declined. Code 04. Account frozen. Camille stared at the small digital screen. The flashing red text burned into her retinas. "I didn't marry a woman, Victoria. I rented a womb from a suburban nobody, and her lease expired at 8 months. The memory of his voice vibrating through the hot microphone hit her like a physical blow to the sternum. Her lungs seized. She gripped the edge of the laminate counter to keep her knees from buckling. The hospital lobby tilted left. "Try it again." "I cannot process a frozen card, ma'am. Your file has a security lock placed by court order. I am required to notify hospital security if you attempt to access the private maternity wing." A pair of familiar footsteps clicked across the linoleum behind her. Not the heavy, rubber-soled tread of hospital security, the sharp, rapid, aggressive strike of designer heels. Camille turned her head. Maya walked toward her. Maya had been her roommate in law school. Maya had held her hair back during the brutal morning sickness of her first trimester. Maya had chosen the pale blue paint for Leo's nursery just 3 weeks ago. Now, Maya wore a sharp, charcoal gray, tailored suit. Her dark hair was pulled back into a severe, flawless bun. She carried a thick white legal envelope pressed against her chest. She did not smile. "Maya!" Camille breathed the name. It was a ghost of a whisper. She took one step toward her friend. Maya stopped 3 feet away. She raised her left hand, palm facing outward, building a wall between them. The overhead fluorescent lights caught the flash of a new, heavy gold Cartier watch against her dark wrist. A watch that cost more than a junior associate's yearly bonus. "Do not make this difficult, Camille." Maya held out the white envelope. Her voice was flat, rehearsed, and stripped of the warmth they had shared for nearly a decade. "You have been served!" Camille did not reach for the envelope. She kept both hands locked over the tight drum of her belly, shielding Leo from the woman who was supposed to be his godmother. "You were the one who felt him kick first." Maya flinched. The muscles in her throat worked as she swallowed hard. She broke eye contact for a fraction of a second. Then, her eyes hardened into polished black stones. "Donovan offered me junior partner. He offered me the corner office on the 40th floor. You walked away from the law to pick out drapes and bake artisanal bread in Buckhead. I have $60,000 in student debt, Camille. I cannot tie my career to a drowning woman. I spent 3 years doing your husband's grunt work while you hosted charity galas. It is my turn to win." Maya thrust the envelope forward. She forced the stiff paper against the torn cream silk of Camille's chest. "Take the papers. I am required to witness physical receipt." Camille let the envelope fall. It hit the linoleum with a soft, dismissive slap. "I trusted you." Maya adjusted her charcoal lapels. She stepped over the fallen envelope, placing herself on the side of the admission desk. She aligned herself with the power. She aligned herself with the money. The slow, rhythmic clap of hands echoed through the empty lobby. Donovan stepped out of the shadows near the pharmacy corridor. He wore a fresh, charcoal black Tom Ford suit. A crisp white pocket square peeked from his breast pocket. He looked rested, polished, and invincible. He walked with the predatory glide of a man who owned the air he breathed. 2 private security contractors in black suits flanked him, their coiled earpieces spiraling down their thick necks. Camille curled her shoulders forward. She took a half step back. Her right heel caught on the ruined hem of her dress. She pressed her forearms flat against the round curve of her son. The maternal instinct to build a physical barricade between her child and the threat overrode her exhaustion. Donovan stopped beside Maya. He did not look at the envelope on the floor. "A spectacular failure," Donovan said. His voice was a low, resonant hum designed to carry across a silent courtroom. He tilted his head, studying her torn dress, her trembling hands, the dirt smudged across her cheekbone. He looked at her the way a man inspects a rusted car on the side of the highway. "You thought you could walk into my hospital wing. You thought you could charge my credit card to check on my son." Camille raised her chin. She locked her jaw. She refused to give him the satisfaction of a sob. "He is my son. He is a Pierce. You are trespassing." Donovan stepped closer. The scent of his expensive peppermint shaving cream and vintage scotch invaded her space. He leaned down, bringing his face inches from her ear. "I took the house. I took the cars. I took the bank accounts. Every piece of plastic in your wallet is dead plastic. You cannot afford an Uber to the city limits, let alone a retainer for a divorce attorney. I own the judge overseeing our case. I own the junior partner you used to call a sister. The entire legal apparatus of this state works to erase your last name." He straightened his posture. He gestured to the vast, empty lobby with open palms. "You have nothing. You are nothing. You are a ghost trespassing in my hospital." The words hung in the sterile hospital air. They bounced off the glass walls. They sank into the pores of her skin. Maya looked at the floor. The triage nurse pretended to type. The security guards crossed their arms in unison. Camille stared into the cold, dead eyes of the man she had sworn to love. She felt the sudden, sharp twist of a contraction tighten across her lower abdomen. The pain radiated from her spine, wrapping around her belly like an iron band. Her breath hitched. She tightened her grip on her stomach, digging her manicured fingernails into the cream silk. She forced the air out of her lungs in a slow, silent stream. She would not let him see her bleed. She would not let him see her break. Her silence infuriated him. The vein pulsed against his dark temple. His jaw clamped shut. He wanted a screaming match. He wanted a hysterical, weeping casualty he could film and leak to the press. Camille gave him a statue. "Escort her off the property," Donovan commanded. He turned his back to her. "If she steps foot inside this building again, call the Atlanta Police Department. Have her booked for violating a restraining order." He walked toward the private elevator banks. Maya followed him without looking back. The two security contractors stepped forward. "Time to go, ma'am." The taller guard pointed toward the sliding glass exit doors. He did not touch her. The cold, lifeless authority in her eyes warned him against making physical contact. Camille bent down. Her injured knee screamed, shooting jagged spikes of pain up her femur. She picked up the white legal envelope. She held it against her chest. She turned around. She walked through the sliding glass doors. The suffocating heat of the Georgia morning slammed into her face. The humidity wrapped around her bare arms like a wet wool blanket. The roar of commuter traffic on Clifton Road deafened her ears. Exhaust fumes mixed with the smell of hot asphalt and damp pine needles. She dragged her ruined shoes down the concrete ramp. A green wrought iron bench sat under the shade of a massive ancient oak tree near the bus stop. The paint was peeling. Cigarette butts littered the dirt around the metal legs. Camille sank onto the hard metal slats. The iron burned through the thin silk covering her thighs. She placed the white envelope on the empty space beside her hip. She wrapped both arms around her belly, bowing her head against the suffocating weight of the morning. Leo stopped kicking. She closed her eyes. She traced the hard, rolling bump of his heel beneath her skin. She had no home. She had no money. She had no allies in the city of Atlanta. The man who had vowed to protect her had just locked her out of her own life. He believed he had stripped her down to the bone. He believed she was an isolated, powerless victim. He forgot who funded the scholarships that built his firm. He forgot who owned the bricks of the courthouse where Victoria Vance sat on the bench. She reached into her silk clutch. She pulled out the crisp white business card. Elias Thorne. The black ink stained her thumb. She pressed the edge of the cardboard against her lower lip. She listened to the distant wail of an ambulance siren cutting through the heavy city air. She picked up her phone. She never dialed the number. A sudden agony stopped her. The iron slats of the green wrought iron bench burned against her thighs. Another contraction ripped through her lower back. It did not fade like the dull aches she had endured on the northbound bus. It peaked. It locked around her spine like a rusted vice. Camille gasped. The sound trapped itself in her throat before her water broke. Warm liquid gushed down her bare legs. soaking into the torn cream silk of her maternity gown. She looked down. The puddle pooling around her ruined Louboutin was not clear amniotic fluid. It was thick. It was dark, unmistakable red. Blood. Panic spiked cold and jagged in her chest. She clamped both hands over her belly. Leo stopped kicking. She dragged her phone from her clutch. Her trembling thumb hovered over the black ink of Elias Thorne's business card. The midday Georgia sun beat down on her shoulders, suffocating and heavy with thick humidity. Traffic roared past the bus stop. No one stopped. No one looked. A shadow fell across the concrete. Camille raised her chin. An older nurse stood over her. She wore faded navy blue scrubs and spotless white orthopedic shoes. A silver name badge reading Helena, pinned to her chest pocket, caught the harsh morning glare. Helena did not hold a clipboard. She did not ask for an insurance card or a matching identification. She looked at the blood spreading on the concrete. She looked at the smudged mascara beneath Camille's dark eyes. Helena reached down. Her hands were strong, calloused, and smelling of lavender soap and rubbing alcohol. She gripped Camille's upper arm with unyielding force. Triage is compromised. We used the service elevator. Helena pulled her up. The pain blinded Camille. White spots danced across her vision, multiplying until the hospital lobby vanished. She leaned her heavy weight against the older woman's sturdy shoulder. They bypassed the sliding glass doors. Helena guided her around the thick trunk of the oak tree toward a rusted metal loading dock hidden behind a row of industrial dumpsters. The stench of rotting cafeteria food and diesel exhaust filled her nose. The heat radiated off the black asphalt, baking the thin leather soles of her shoes. Camille stumbled. Her knee gave out. Helena caught her under the arm, bearing the weight without a single grunt of effort. The older nurse possessed a quiet, unmovable strength. The fluorescent lights of the underground corridor buzzed a low, relentless C-sharp rhythm. Water dripped from exposed copper pipes running along the ceiling, pooling in grimy puddles on the bare concrete floor. Helena swiped a blank white keycard over an unmarked scanner pad. Heavy steel doors parted with a mechanical groan. "They froze your file upstairs," Helena said. She pushed Camille into an empty wheelchair, stolen from the laundry bay. Dr. Eris issued the alert. "If you bleed out in the lobby, they are instructed to call a security transport." Camille gripped the plastic armrests. Another contraction hit, longer and sharper than the last. She squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her chin down into her chest. Her teeth chattered despite the sweltering heat of the day. "Is he safe? We will see." Helena wheeled her past endless rows of stacked cardboard medical supplies. The air grew colder, smelling of ozone and bleached linen. They entered a small, sterile trauma bay hidden behind the secondary surgical suites. It was a forgotten room, unused, sterile. It was not the luxurious private maternity wing Donovan had booked months ago. There were no fresh orchids in crystal vases. There were no mahogany-paneled walls, no velvet recovery chairs, no sweeping views of the Atlanta skyline. The walls were painted a stark, institutional green. A single metal sink stood in the corner. The room smelled of iodine and stale rubbing alcohol. It was bare. It was quiet. It was safe. Helena locked the wheelchair wheels with a sharp click. She lifted Camille onto the stiff paper of the examination table. The paper crinkled, a harsh, abrasive sound in the dead silence of the room. "No epidural," Helena said. She ripped open a sterile plastic package of stainless steel clamps. The tearing plastic sounded like a gunshot. "No time for the anesthesiologist. The abruption is minor but active." The baby is in distress. You push now, or we lose him." Camille stared at the acoustic ceiling tiles. A water stain shaped like a crescent moon marked the plaster above her head. She placed both hands flat against the high, tight mound of her belly. The fear threatened to swallow her. She forced the terror back down her throat. Leo needed her. "Tell me when. Now." Camille bore down. She did not scream. She ground her molars together until her jaw popped. The pain tore through her pelvis like shattered glass. She gripped the metal side rails. Her knuckles turned stark white against her dark skin. The delicate cream silk of her dress tore further along the seam as she arched her back. The physical agony eclipsed the betrayal of the ballroom. It eclipsed the frozen bank accounts and the public execution of her character. She pushed. Sweat stung her eyes. The harsh overhead surgical light burned her retinas. Her breath came in ragged, desperate gasps. Again! Helena's hands moved with practiced, ruthless efficiency. Camille pulled her knees back. She tucked her chin. She pushed her remaining strength down into the dark, terrifying center of the pain. She offered her body to the fire. She broke herself open to save him. A sharp, wet sound echoed off the cinder-block walls. The pressure vanished. Silence stretched across the tiny room. Camille held her breath. Her chest stopped heaving. She listened to the hum of the fluorescent tube lights. She listened to the squeak of Helena's rubber soles against the gray linoleum. Then, a jagged, wet sputter. A cry pierced the air. It was furious. It was loud. It filled the barren space with life. Helena placed the infant onto Camille's chest. Leo Pierce. Sterling was heavy. He weighed nearly 7 pounds of solid, writhing heat against her bare skin. He smelled of iron, amniotic fluid, and raw humanity. His skin was a deep, mottled purple flushing to a warm, rich brown in the bright clinical light. He kicked his tiny legs against her collarbone. Camille wrapped her trembling arms around his slippery, fragile body. She buried her face into the crown of his wet, dark hair. The scent anchored her to the earth. The terror drained from her muscles, leaving behind a hollow, aching exhaustion. Helena draped a warmed, rough cotton hospital blanket over them both. She checked Camille's bleeding. She adjusted an IV drip she had threaded into a vein on the back of Camille's hand during the chaos. "I will register his birth certificate under the name Sterling," Helena said. She disposed of the soiled gloves in a red biohazard bin. "They are searching the 4th floor maternity suites for you. I must lock the door from the outside." Helena walked out. The heavy door clicked shut. Camille lay alone in the windowless trauma bay. The monitors beeped a slow, steady rhythm. Leo ceased crying. He settled against the warmth of her chest, his tiny lungs expanding and contracting in tandem with hers. His small fist, no larger than a walnut, curled tight against her collarbone. She had no home. She had no husband. She had no money in her pocket. She was a mother hiding in a supply closet to protect her son from his own father. The memory clawed its way up through the anesthetic haze of her exhaustion. She squeezed her eyes shut. A single tear escaped, cutting a hot, jagged path through the dried sweat on her temple. She wiped it away with the back of her thumb. She pulled the rough cotton blanket tighter around her son. She lifted her chin, staring at the locked metal door. 3 floors above, the polished elevator doors of the private maternity wing slid open. Victoria Vance stepped out. She wore a tailored crimson blazer over a matching silk blouse. A thick gold statement necklace shaped like coiled serpents rested against her collarbone. Heavy gold bangles rattled down her dark wrists with every aggressive stride. Her stilettos clicked like hammer strikes against the pristine white marble of the hospital corridor. She demanded attention. She commanded the space. The pastel walls and soft lullaby music playing over the intercom stood in stark contrast to her predatory energy. She was a shark swimming through a nursery. "This is unacceptable," Victoria announced. She bypassed the security desk and marched toward the central nursing station. "I expect competence when I request a patient file. Find her." Donovan followed 2 paces behind. His midnight navy Tom Ford suit remained immaculate. He checked his Rolex. The polished silver caught the light of the crystal chandelier hanging in the center of the lobby. He did not look at the framed photographs of smiling newborns lining the pastel walls. He did not care about the children. He only cared about the air. Marcus hurried alongside him, clutching a leather portfolio thick with court orders. "The triage nurse confirmed she was bleeding, sir," Marcus said. He kept his voice low, his eyes darting toward the nervous hospital staff. "But she never checked into the maternity ward. Security lost her on the camera feed near the loading docks. They are checking the basement footage." Donovan stopped walking. He turned to his senior associate. "You lost a pregnant woman bleeding in a bright white dress? A woman with frozen assets and no vehicle?" Marcus swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed against his stiff collar. "We are searching the lower levels now. She cannot hide for long. The exits are sealed." Victoria slammed her hand flat onto the raised laminate counter of the nursing station. The startled charge nurse jumped, dropping a plastic medication cup onto the tile floor. Pills scattered across the linoleum. "My husband is the future district attorney of this city," Victoria lied, her voice projected to reach every open patient door in the wing. "His deranged ex-wife is hiding a stolen infant somewhere in this facility. She poses a threat to herself and to the child. You will initiate a lockdown. You will call the police. You will do your jobs before I drag this hospital into a federal negligence lawsuit and strip your medical licenses." She adjusted her heavy gold necklace. She sneered at a passing orderly who dared to stare at her. She thrived on the panic she created. She wanted the cameras to arrive. She wanted the narrative cemented before Camille could speak a single word in her own defense. Donovan turned away from the commotion. He stepped into the stairwell. His wingtips echoed down the concrete steps. He descended 3 flights of stairs, leaving the frantic noise of the luxury ward behind. He pushed through a heavy fire door leading to the subterranean maintenance corridors. The air smelled of industrial bleach and damp concrete. He walked down the long gray hallway. He stopped at a heavy steel door. He looked through the small wire-reinforced observation window to watch her rock the wrapped newborn in the dim light. He rested his palm flat against the cold metal door. He turned away when Victoria called his name from the corridor. Camille did not hear the footsteps retreat. She stared at the small square of glass in the door. She traced the warm curve of Leo's cheek with her thumb. The bleeding had slowed. The panic had burned away, leaving cold iron in its wake. Donovan thought he had locked her in a cage. He thought he had severed her from the world. He was wrong. She held her son in silence. The fluorescent tube lights in the hidden trauma bay flickered twice before fading to a dull amber hum. Night swallowed the hospital. The small, reinforced wire window in the heavy steel door reflected only black glass. The ambient noise of the Atlanta traffic on Clifton Road had faded into a distant, rhythmic thrum against the concrete foundation of the building. Camille lay on the stiff paper of the examination table. The paper crinkled beneath her shoulder blades every time she took a slow, rattling breath. Her torn cream silk maternity gown clung to her skin, stiff with dried sweat and the copper-scented remnants of her own blood. The plastic IV needle taped to the back of her left hand pulled at her vein. She ignored the sharp pinch. The physical agony radiating through her pelvis felt distant. The fire in her torn ligaments was nothing compared to the weight resting against her collarbone. Leo Pierce, Sterling slept on her chest. He was a heavy, warm anchor holding her fragile bones to the earth. His tiny, translucent fingernails pressed into her bare skin. His chest rose and fell in rapid, bird-like flutters, syncing with the erratic drum of her own heartbeat. He smelled of milk, iodine, and the faint, distinct scent of fresh rain. Camille wrapped the coarse, institutional cotton blanket tighter around his small shoulders. She rested her chin against the damp crown of his dark hair. She refused to close her eyes. Sleep was a luxury she could not afford. Her phone rested on the metal surgical tray beside the bed. The screen was cracked from the violent impact against the Biltmore ballroom marble. The black glass mirrored the dark ceiling. She had turned the device off 3 hours ago to kill the cellular GPS tracker. Donovan demanded absolute control over his environment. She knew his digital footprint algorithms. She knew Marcus would be pinging her cell towers the moment the sun went down. She reached her right hand across the narrow gap. Her knuckles brushed the cold stainless steel of the tray. She picked up the device. The rectangular weight felt like a loaded weapon in her palm. She pressed the power button. The glowing white apple illuminated her thumb. A barrage of missed call notifications flooded the lock screen. 12 from Marcus, 4 from Maya, 0 from Donovan. He did not want to find her to save her. He wanted to find her to take the boy. Camille stared at the glowing keypad. She had not dialed this specific number in 4 years. She had walked out of a towering, glass-walled office on the 70th floor of the Manhattan skyline, leaving her inheritance on a vast mahogany desk. She chose the illusion of a self-made man. She chose the promise of a marriage built on equal footing, rejecting the suffocating shadow of a billion-dollar empire. She traded gold for dirt. She thought she was planting a garden. She had only dug a grave. She hovered her thumb over the glass screen. Doubt crept into her throat. Pride tasted like ash on her tongue. Her father had warned her about the bottomless hunger in Donovan's eyes. He saw the predator beneath the tailored Tom Ford suits and the rehearsed courtroom charm. She had defended her husband. She had severed her bloodline to prove a point to a man who only viewed her as an asset. She looked down at the sleeping infant. Leo stirred. He tightened his tiny fist against her skin. The hesitation vanished. The ash in her mouth turned to iron. She typed 11 digits into the keypad from memory. She did not have the contact saved in her directory. She had memorized the sequence when she was a little girl sitting in the back of a black Maybach. She pressed the green icon. She brought the cracked glass to her ear. The line rang once. It rang twice. The digital tone echoed inside the quiet trauma bay. Her heart hammered against her ribs, transferring the frantic, syncopated rhythm into her son's sleeping body. "Leo Pierce!" Sterling stirred in his sleep. The ringing stopped. A hollow, heavy click filled the speaker. No automated greeting, no executive assistant asking for a name, just the vast, heavy silence of a man who owned the airspace he breathed. Camille squeezed her eyes shut. "Dad!" Her voice cracked. The single syllable shattered the quiet of the room. It carried 4 years of silence, 4 years of stubborn pride, and the jagged, bleeding reality of the last 12 hours. "It's me." She swallowed the sharp lump forming in her throat. She pressed her free hand over Leo's warm back to steady the trembling in her fingers. "I need you." Silence stretched across the cellular connection. It was not a cold silence. It was dense. It was tectonic. It was the sound of a sleeping giant opening its eyes. The static hummed against her ear. She heard the faint, distinct clink of heavy crystal meeting polished wood. She heard a slow, deep breath draw in over 1,000 miles of fiber optic wire. "I never stopped watching over you." The voice was a low, rolling rumble. It possessed the raw, undeniable gravity of a collapsing star. It did not ask for apologies. It did not demand explanations for the 4 years of missed birthdays. "Where are you, Camille?" "Emory University Hospital, subterranean trauma bay near the loading docks. They froze my file upstairs. They locked the doors." A sharp intake of breath hissed through the speaker. "Who is they?" "Donovan and Judge Vance." The silence returned. This time, the silence was dangerous. The air pressure in the room seemed to shift. A cold, metallic tension bled through the tiny speaker. "Did he put his hands on you?" "He ordered security to throw me out of the Biltmore. I fell on the marble. The baby." She looked down at the dark, wet hair pressed against her collarbone. "He is early, Dad, but he is safe." "A boy?" "Yes." "Hold him tight." The voice shifted. The paternal warmth receded, replaced by the calculating, unmerciful executioner she remembered from her childhood. "The foundation is awake. The machinery is moving. I am 20 minutes out." Camille blinked. "You are in Atlanta?" "I landed at Hartsfield-Jackson 3 hours ago. I watched the press conference broadcast from the ballroom. I have been sitting in the hospital parking garage since the sun went down, waiting for you to turn your phone back on." A tear slipped free. It cut a hot path through the dry dust and sweat on her cheek. It fell, soaking into the rough cotton blanket covering her son. "They took everything, Dad. He froze the joint accounts. He secured an ex parte custody order. He left me with nothing." "He left you with an empty checking account, Camille. He did not leave you with nothing. He forgot the blood in your veins." A heavy engine roared in the background of the call. The muffled sound of reinforced tires hitting asphalt vibrated through the small speaker. "Stay in the room. Keep the door locked. Do not speak to the hospital staff. Do not speak to local law enforcement. When the handle turns, you will know it is me." "Dad, I have you, little bird. We are going to burn his house down." The line went dead. The dial tone blared a sharp, dissonant chord into her ear. Camille lowered the phone. She placed the cracked glass back onto the stainless steel surgical tray. The metal clattered against the table legs. She let her hand rest there for a long moment, absorbing the cold, unyielding reality of the steel. The trembling in her fingers stopped. The hollow, desperate vacuum in her chest filled with something dark and heavy. The fear evaporating from her bloodstream left behind a clean, sharp focus. Donovan had spent 4 years convincing her she was fragile. He had spent the morning trying to convince the world she was insane. He expected a victim. He was about to meet a Sterling. Camille adjusted her grip on the newborn. She shifted her weight on the examination table. The torn cream silk of her dress pooled around her waist. She ignored the dull throb of her injured knee. She ignored the burning ache in her pelvis. She looked at Leo. His tiny chest rose and fell in a steady, unbroken rhythm. His dark eyes opened for a fraction of a second, catching the dim amber glow of the emergency lighting. He blinked against the harsh world. He did not cry. The corner of her mouth twitched. Her lips parted. A small, involuntary huff of air escaped her lungs. She almost smiled. It was not a smile of joy. It was the baring of teeth. It was the quiet, terrifying realization of a woman who just remembered she owned the chessboard. Victoria wanted equity. Donovan wanted a dynasty. They built their towering ambitions on a foundation made of sand. They did not know her father owned the beach. She stroked the soft curve of her son's cheek with her thumb. The skin was impossibly soft. The amber hum of the fluorescent tube lights wavered. A sound echoed from the subterranean corridor. Footsteps. They did not drag with the quiet, shuffling gait of Helena returning with fresh gauze. They did not bounce with the hurried urgency of an orderly pushing a laundry cart. They were heavy. They were deliberate. Leather soles struck the gray linoleum with the measured, rhythmic cadence of a predator tracking a scent. Camille froze. She stopped breathing. She pulled the baby flush against her sternum, flattening her spine against the wall behind the examination table. The footsteps grew louder. They passed the stacked cardboard medical supplies. They bypassed the rusted loading dock door. They closed the distance to the forgotten trauma bay. 10 feet away, the heavy scrape of leather against the floorboards echoing through the concrete hall. Then, 5 feet, the rhythm halted. A shadow eclipsed the small, wire-reinforced observation window. The amber light from the hallway vanished. A towering silhouette blocked the glass. Camille stared at the heavy steel door. The door handle turned. She held her breath in the dark. The metal mechanism groaned under heavy pressure. The brass latch clicked. The heavy steel door swung inward. The rusted hinges shrieked, a harsh metallic protest against the damp subterranean air. The noise shattered the quiet sanctuary Camille had built in the dark. Arthur Sterling stepped into the dim amber light of the trauma bay. He wore a bespoke charcoal wool suit tailored in Savile Row. A silk tie the color of crushed obsidian rested flush against his crisp white collar. A silver Patek Philippe watch caught the wavering flicker of the dying fluorescent tubes, casting a sharp reflection across the institutional green walls. He carried a solid ebony walking stick capped with a polished silver handle. He did not rush. He did not storm the room with frantic, hollow panic. He possessed the quiet, suffocating gravity of a man who moved global markets with a simple nod of his head. He owned the silence. 5 men followed him through the threshold. They wore identical matte black tactical suits. Coiled, transparent earpieces snaked down their thick, muscular necks. Heavy black Kevlar vests contoured to their broad chests. They moved with a terrifying, synchronized grace, lacking the clumsy, heavy-footed bravado of Donovan's hired security. They fanned out across the small room. They secured the perimeter in 3 seconds flat. One operative positioned his broad back against the heavy steel door. Another swept the dark corners of the ceiling for hidden surveillance lenses. They said nothing. They became the walls. Arthur Sterling stopped at the foot of the examination table. He looked at the torn, blood-stained paper crinkling beneath his daughter's spine. He looked at the jagged ruin of the delicate cream silk maternity gown exposing her scraped, bruised knees. He looked at the tiny, wrapped bundle resting against her damp collarbone. He placed both large, calloused hands over the silver handle of his walking stick. He leaned his weight forward. He studied the sharp, erratic rise and fall of her chest. He mapped the damage inflicted by the man she had called a husband. Arthur traced the jagged tear in the cream silk with his eyes. He saw the dried mud flaking against her shin. He saw the dark, exhausted hollows beneath her eyes. He did not offer hollow comfort. He cataloged every injury. He calculated the exact cost in blood. He prepared the invoice. Camille did not cry. She did not offer a trembling apology. She lifted her chin. She met his gaze with eyes hardened in the same fire that had forged the Sterling Empire. Arthur crossed the gray linoleum in 3 long strides. The rubber tip of his cane struck the floor with a rhythmic, measured cadence. He lowered his towering frame. He reached out. He pressed his rough palm against the crown of her dark hair. He let his thumb drop, brushing against the warm, mottled cheek of the sleeping newborn. 2 generations of sterling blood recognized each other in the subterranean dark. "He has your mother's fighting jaw," Arthur said. His voice was a low, rolling rumble that vibrated through the cinder block walls. "He has his grandfather's fight," Camille replied. Arthur gave a single, slow nod. The reunion was finished. The war began. He straightened his spine. He turned his back to his daughter. He faced the 5 men in black, tactical gear. He raised his left index finger. The small room erupted into kinetic, soundless action. The operative standing nearest the metal sink produced a thick, encrypted satellite phone. He dialed a sequence of numbers from memory. He bypassed the local switchboards. He spoke in clipped, hushed tones to the offshore Cayman Island banking regulators. He did not ask for permission. He dictated terms. Freeze the Pearson Associates corporate accounts. Trace the $3 million wire from yesterday afternoon. Flag the transaction under the Patriot Act for illicit domestic asset shielding. Execute a hard lock on all routing numbers associated with Donovan Pierce. A second operative unzipped a heavy canvas messenger bag. He extracted a reinforced magnesium laptop. He flipped the screen open. He typed with rapid, bruising force. Sharp blue light illuminated his harsh jawline, casting long shadows against the bare walls. His keystrokes sounded like machine gun fire. "I have the hospital administration on an open line. The Emory Board of Directors is awake. They are reviewing the security footage from the Biltmore Ballroom. They are terminating Dr. Aris's privileges effective 60 seconds ago. The ex parte custody order is nullified pending federal judicial review." Arthur leaned his weight onto his silver cane. He stared at the locked steel door. "Buy the Buckhead estate debt. Call the note. Foreclose by sunrise. Change the locks back." The operative nodded. His fingers flew across the keys. "Send the Emory lobby footage to the State Bar Association," Arthur commanded. "Flag Maya Harper for ethical misconduct. Revoke her character fitness certification. She served a fraudulent ex parte order. She will never practice law in this state again." The operatives moved with terrifying efficiency. They dismantled Donovan Pierce's kingdom brick by brick. They did not need weeks of slow, grinding litigation or grandstanding press conferences. They commanded the private equity levers that controlled the judges, the banks, and the real estate of the entire eastern seaboard. They erased his leverage in real time. Footsteps echoed in the long subterranean corridor. They were fast. They were sharp. They carried the arrogant, polished strike of designer leather wingtips smacking against the cold concrete. Donovan Pierce pushed the heavy steel door open. He wore his immaculate midnight navy Tom Ford suit. The fabric remained pristine, untouched by the frantic search of the upper floors. He carried a thick leather portfolio tucked under his left arm. Marcus flanked him on his right, clutching a stack of freshly printed injunctions against his chest. 2 hospital security guards trailed behind them, their faces pale and shining with cold sweat in the damp, claustrophobic air. Donovan stepped into the trauma bay. Ah! He stopped. He surveyed the chaotic geometry of the room. He saw 5 massive men wearing black tactical gear. He saw the encrypted satellite phone. He saw an older man with silver hair leaning on a silver walking stick. He saw his ruined wife holding a quiet bundle of rough cotton blankets on a blood-stained examination table. He threw his head back. He laughed. The rich, booming sound bounced off the cinder-block walls. It lacked the theatrical polish of his ballroom performance. It carried a raw, unhinged superiority. He believed he still owned the chessboard. He believed the men in the room were desperate actors hired by a broken woman. "You found an audience," Donovan said. He adjusted his silk tie with a fluid, practiced motion. He stepped forward, invading the tight space. "I expected you to be crying alone in the dark. Instead, you hired a rent-a-cop escort service. What did you trade for their time, Camille? The torn dress? A promise of future wages from your frozen checking account?" Marcus shifted his weight from his left foot to his right. He did not laugh. He looked at the Patek Philippe watch gleaming on Arthur's wrist. He looked at the tailored cut of the Savile Row charcoal wool. He swallowed hard. The sharp click of his throat working echoed in the tight space. Donovan did not notice the fear paralyzing his associate. He commanded the air. He pointed a long, manicured finger toward the examination table. "Hand over the boy. The ex parte order grants me physical custody. He is a Pierce. He belongs in a luxury nursery on the 40th floor, not shivering in a dirty maintenance closet with a deranged woman. You will sign the severance paperwork Marcus is holding. You will walk out of the service entrance. You will disappear into the suburbs where I found you. If you make me ask twice, these hospital guards will drag you to the curb by your hair." Camille tightened her arms around her son. Leo Pierce Sterling slept beneath the rough fabric. His tiny, warm chest expanded against her bare skin. He let out a soft, breathy sigh, oblivious to the towering threats circling his mother. He grounded her to the physical world. He was the only reason she had survived the marble floor. She did not look at her husband. She looked at her father. Arthur Sterling stepped forward. The rubber tip of his walking stick struck the gray linoleum with the heavy finality of a gavel drop. Donovan shifted his gaze to the older man. A sneer curled his upper lip. "Whoever you are, step aside. You are interfering with a court-ordered custody transfer. I am a senior partner at Pearson Associates. I am the future district attorney of Atlanta. I will have you arrested for criminal obstruction before you can draw your next breath." Arthur did not blink. He did not raise his voice. He reached into his tailored breast pocket. He extracted a folded sheet of heavy cream stationery. He held the thick paper between his index and middle finger. "I know exactly who you are, Mr. Pierce." The low, rolling rumble of his voice vibrated through the floorboards. "You are a man who bought a mahogany desk and mistook it for an empire." Donovan stiffened, his jaw locked. The vein in his temple pulsed against his dark skin. He despised being dismissed. He demanded fear. He demanded respect. He received only cold, clinical observation. "Take him out," Donovan snapped. He waved a dismissive hand toward the 2 hospital security guards standing near the doorframe. The guards did not move. They stared at the 5 tactical operatives blocking the path. The operatives did not draw weapons. They simply adjusted their broad shoulders, creating an impenetrable wall of black Kevlar. The hospital guards backed away. They lowered their hands. They retreated into the subterranean hallway, abandoning the lawyer to his fate. Donovan turned his head. He glared at Marcus. "Call the police. Tell dispatch to send a tactical unit to the basement." "The Atlanta chief of police is currently on hold on line 4, sir," the operative with the laptop stated. He did not look up from his glowing screen. His fingers continued flying across the keyboard. "He sends his regards to Mr. Sterling." Donovan froze. The arrogant sneer faltered. His brow furrowed. The muscles around his eyes twitched. He looked at the operative. He looked back at the older man leaning on the silver cane. "Sterling?" Donovan asked. The syllables tasted foreign in his mouth. He scanned the room again. He analyzed the bespoke charcoal suit. He studied the tactical operatives dismantling his offshore accounts in real time. He looked past the men. He looked at his wife. Camille sat upright on the blood-stained paper. She pulled her shoulders back. The delicate cream silk draped over the fragile, sleeping body of their newborn son. She offered him no tears. She offered him no panic defense. She watched him drown in his own confusion. Her silence was louder than any scream. "Arthur," Donovan stammered. He raised his hands in a placating gesture. He slipped back into his negotiator persona. "We can settle this in chambers. We are both businessmen. Camille is unwell. She needs proper psychiatric care. I was only trying to protect the firm's reputation." "You do not speak to me," Arthur said. "You do not look at me. You look at the floor." Donovan's mouth snapped shut. His chin dipped down against his will. Arthur Sterling stepped closer. He invaded Donovan's airspace. The sharp scent of vintage scotch on the lawyer's breath met the sterile, cold ozone of the trauma bay. "My daughter never needed your money." Arthur spoke slow. He carved every word out of cold, unyielding granite. "She was testing your character. You failed." Donovan's pupils dilated. His breath hitched in his chest. "What is this?" Donovan demanded. His voice cracked. The booming courtroom baritone splintered into thin, brittle panic. "Camille has no family. She is a suburban nobody. She came into my house with a broken suitcase and a fake smile. You thought you were the master of this courtroom, counselor, but you forgot who built the floor you are standing on." Arthur Sterling dropped the folded cream stationery. "Oh!" The heavy paper fluttered down through the amber light. It landed on the gray linoleum right near the toe of Donovan's polished leather wingtip. Donovan looked down. The gold-embossed letterhead caught the dim glow of the emergency lighting. The Sterling Justice Center. The same towering logo etched into the frosted glass doors of his own prestigious firm. The same crest stamped on the massive scholarship checks that had funded his entire law school education. The same foundation that owned the commercial lease to the 70-story Pearson Associates building in downtown Atlanta. Marcus dropped the stack of injunctions. "Doke!" The white legal paper scattered across the dirty gray linoleum. It sounded like falling rain. "Sir," Marcus whispered. His hands shook. The leather portfolio rattled against his ribs. "Sir, the Cayman LLC. I just checked the secure portal on my phone." Donovan snapped his head toward his associate. "What about it? It emptied," Marcus stammered. He stepped backward toward the heavy steel door, desperate to escape the blast radius. "The capital, all $3 million. It is gone." The bank regulators authorized an immediate federal seizure. The firm's operational accounts are frozen. The payroll checks are bouncing right now. The commercial landlord just filed a lockout notice. Donovan could not speak. The muscles in his neck went rigid. His lips parted, but his lungs refused to draw air. Arthur Sterling raised his silver cane. He pointed the rubber tip at the center of Donovan's chest. "You paraded my daughter on a public stage. You colluded with a corrupt judge in a crimson dress. You weaponized the press to break her spirit. You believed you could steal my grandson and discard his mother in a hospital basement like trash." Arthur took one final step. The predator had met the Leviathan. "I am Arthur Sterling. I own the banks you hide your stolen money in. I own the courthouse your mistress presides over. I own the concrete you are standing on." Donovan stumbled back. The heel of his expensive shoe caught on the scattered injunctions. He lost his balance for a fraction of a second. His arms flailed. He caught the metal doorframe to keep himself upright. He looked at Camille. She stroked the dark hair of her newborn son. She stared back at him with eyes made of polished, black stone. Her silence was a guillotine. She possessed a fortune that could buy his entire political party with pocket change. She had slept beside him for 4 years. She had ironed his shirts. She had poured his coffee. She had watched him gloat about his wealth, knowing she could erase his entire existence with a single phone call. She let him build his kingdom of sand. Now she was bringing the ocean. The world tilted. The walls of the trauma bay closed in. Donovan opened his mouth. A pathetic, ragged gasp escaped his throat. He was suffocating. "Call Judge Vance," Arthur instructed the operative, holding the satellite phone. "Tell her to look out her window. Tell her the media is waiting downstairs. Tell her the State Ethics Board just received the hot mic audio from the Biltmore podium." The man in the black tactical suit pressed a button on his device. Donovan watched his legacy dissolve. He felt the cold terror gripping his lungs, freezing the blood in his veins. He had traded $1 billion dynasty for a leased condo and a fake political headline. He had dug his own grave using a silver spoon he stole from a titan. He realized the truth. He owned nothing. He was nothing. The floor vanished. The scene shifted back to where it began. A final reckoning awaited them all. The Grand Biltmore Hotel ballroom smelled of stale champagne, melting ice, and the ozone of overheated camera flashes. The majestic ice swans standing in the center of the expansive room had lost their sharp, regal edges. Cold water dripped in a relentless, rhythmic tempo onto the sodden, imported linen tablecloths. The sprawling marble floor remained scuffed by the hurried, aggressive strike of leather shoes from the morning press pit. 500 members of Atlanta's legal elite packed the cavernous space. They sat in the gilded chairs. Nobody held a crystal flute. Nobody adjusted a silk tie. Nobody spoke. The string quartet was gone. The grand piano sat closed in the far corner. The vibrant, celebratory energy that had fueled Donovan Pierce's morning ascension had rotted into a suffocating, metallic dread. Camille sat in a high-backed, tufted velvet chair in the exact center of the mahogany stage. The torn cream silk of her ruined maternity gown still clung to her damp legs. The jagged tear exposing her bruised, scraped knee remained on display. The dried dirt caked along her left shin served as physical evidence of her eviction. A coarse, institutional cotton hospital blanket rested over her chest, a stark contrast to the opulent gold-flocked wallpaper looming behind her. Leo shifted his tiny weight, letting out a soft, breathy sigh. His tiny, translucent fingernails curled tight against the bruised skin of her collarbone. He smelled of iodine, milk, and the faint scent of fresh rain. His small chest rose and fell in a rapid, bird-like flutter. She rested her left hand flat over the small, warm curve of his back. The physical agony radiating through her torn round ligaments faded beneath his heavy weight. He anchored her to the earth. She traced the soft, dark hair on his crown with her thumb. 5 elite private security operatives in black tactical gear guarded the ballroom exits. Coiled, transparent earpieces snaked down their thick necks. They stood with their broad shoulders squared, forming an impenetrable wall of Kevlar and silent obedience. The heavy oak doors were sealed shut. Donovan stood at the base of the stage. He lacked the phalanx of junior partners who had flanked him 10 hours earlier. His midnight navy Tom Ford suit sagged at the shoulders. The crisp white pocket square lay crumpled in his breast pocket. He stood on the exact marble tiles where his wife had fallen. Victoria Vance stood 2 feet to his right. She wore the same crimson Oscar de la Renta sheath dress. The fabric pooled around her ankles like fresh blood. Her heavy gold bangles hung silent against her dark wrists. The predatory, rehearsed smirk had vanished from her red lips, replaced by a tight, rigid line of trapped panic. She did not reach out to brush Donovan's shoulder. The physical distance between them felt like a sprawling canyon. Arthur Sterling leaned his weight onto his solid ebony walking stick. He stood near the heavy velvet stage curtains. The polished silver handle of his cane caught the harsh glare of the overhead strobe lights. His bespoke charcoal wool suit absorbed the shadows. He looked out over the sea of silent, captive reporters. He commanded the room without raising his voice. He gave a single, slow nod. Elias Thorne stepped out from the back of the press pit. He wore the same faded brown corduroy jacket. His heavy camera rested against his chest, the black nylon strap digging into the worn collar of his blue button-down shirt. He did not hold a notepad. He held a small black remote. He walked down the center aisle. The journalists parted for him, pulling their knees back to clear his path. He stopped beside the AV console. He clicked the main button. A massive canvas projector screen unrolled from the ceiling, dropping heavy and flat over the velvet stage curtains. The Biltmore crystal chandeliers dimmed to a dull amber hum. The screen flared a blinding, stark white. It was the Biltmore security footage, time-stamped 10 hours earlier. The silent, high-definition feed illuminated the faces of the crowd in pale, flickering light. It showed the expansive marble floor. It showed Donovan standing at the mahogany podium, pointing a long, manicured finger at the velvet curtains. It showed the 2 thick-necked security guards marching forward. Heavy hands grabbed Camille's upper arms. Thick fingers dug deep into the delicate cream silk. The brutal backward pull played out in agonizing, stuttering frames. The sudden drop. The footage captured Camille twisting midair, curling her spine forward. It showed her throwing both bare arms over the tight, heavy drum of her pregnant belly. She took the catastrophic impact on her knees and cheekbone. She absorbed the brutal shock of the cold marble to shield her unborn son from the devastating force. The ballroom crowd let out a collective, ragged gasp. Camera shutters fired in rapid bursts, the mechanical click sounding like hail hitting a tin roof. The undeniable truth projected at 20 feet tall painted Donovan as a butcher. The polished, heroic narrative he had sold to the morning news anchors burned to ash before their eyes. Arthur Sterling raised his left hand. The projector screen went black. Maya stepped out from the front row of the press pit. She wore her sharp, charcoal gray tailored suit. Her posture lacked the arrogant, flawless rigidity from the hospital lobby. Her shoulders slumped. Her hands shook so hard her gold Cartier watch rattled a frantic rhythm against her wristbone. She walked up the wooden stairs to the stage. She bypassed the center chair. She gripped the edges of the mahogany podium. She stared out at the melting ice swans. "I drafted the emergency ex parte custody order this morning." Her voice trembled through the overhead speakers. It lacked the theatrical projection required for a courtroom. It sounded thin. It sounded broken. "I falsified the psychiatric evaluation under direct pressure from Donovan Pierce. Camille is not mentally ill. She was never a threat to her child. She never fabricated a delusion. I traded my ethics for a corner office, and I ruined an innocent mother to get it." Maya closed her eyes. A single tear cut through her flawless makeup. "I resign my position at Pierce & Associates. I surrender my law license to the state bar." Maya stepped back from the microphone. She walked down the stairs. She dissolved into the silent crowd, erasing her own legacy to escape the blast radius of the Sterling Empire. The room waited in stunned silence. Helena walked forward. The older nurse bypassed the stairs. She stood at the edge of the elevated stage. She wore her faded navy blue scrubs and spotless white orthopedic shoes. She did not require a microphone. She carried the unmovable, righteous authority of a woman who traded in blood and breath, not contracts and lies. She crossed her strong, calloused arms over her chest. She glared down at the man in the midnight navy suit. He locked her out of the maternity ward while she was bleeding. Helena pointed a blunt, unmanicured finger at Donovan's chest. "I delivered that baby in a subterranean maintenance closet on a rusted examination table." She pushed through the agonizing pain of an active placental abruption in the dark so he wouldn't steal her son. "She bled on concrete while you celebrated with champagne." Helena lowered her hand. She turned her back on him, dismissing his existence. The crowd braced for the next blow. Elias Thorne walked up the wooden stairs. The heavy rubber soles of his worn boots scuffed against the polished mahogany. He stepped up to the podium. He set his black canvas messenger bag on the floorboards. He opened a thick manila folder. The stiff paper rustled against the wood, the harsh sound amplified by the sensitive microphones. He smoothed the official printed transcript flat with his ink-stained thumb. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, peering out over the vast, breathless room. Audio captured from the lavalier microphone taped beneath this exact podium 10 minutes prior to the morning press conference. Elias read the text. He did not perform the lines. He did not mimic the baritone cadence. He let the sterile, devastating words carry their own weight. "I didn't marry a woman, Victoria. I rented a womb from a suburban nobody, and her lease expired at 8 months. Silence slammed into the Biltmore ballroom. 3 full seconds of physical, unbroken silence. The ambient hum of the central air conditioning vanished beneath the crushing, tectonic weight of the room. The scent of chemical floor wax and stale champagne thickened in the throats of 500 journalists. Elias rested his hands flat against the edges of the mahogany podium, his knuckles pale under the harsh stage lights. Marcus ceased breathing in the front row, his chest frozen in rigid terror, his eyes wide and fixed on the floorboards. Arthur Sterling struck the marble floor with his silver-handled cane. The sharp, concussive crack shattered the quiet. The sound bounced off the crystal chandeliers. "Tell me, who has nothing now?" Elias clicked the wireless presentation remote. The massive screen unrolled over the curtains illuminated the dark room a second time. It was not the Biltmore footage. It was a sterile, brightly lit hallway of a private women's clinic in Buckhead. The digital timestamp glowing in the bottom right corner read 15 minutes past 10 in the morning. Today. Victoria paced the clinic lobby on the giant screen. The crimson dress marked her like a neon flare against the pastel walls. She approached the polished reception desk. A nurse handed her a printed white medical document. Victoria reached into her designer handbag. She passed a thick manila envelope across the counter. The nurse slipped the envelope into a locked drawer. The video ended in heavy silence. "Ah!" A man in a crisp white lab coat stepped out from behind the velvet curtains. Dr. Evans carried a handheld microphone. He stood beside Elias at the podium. He looked straight at the front row of camera lenses. "Judge Vance is not pregnant." The collective inhale of the press pit sounded like a vacuum sealing. "She paid my receptionist $10,000 in untraceable cash to secure a positive blood test belonging to a 22-year-old college student. She never carried a child. She fabricated the entire physical gestation to leverage a senior partnership and a public engagement from a desperate man." The muscles in Donovan's face collapsed, dropping his jaw toward his silk tie as his hollow eyes tracked the flat crimson fabric covering her stomach. The rehearsed, arrogant tension draining from his cheeks left behind only the pale, bloodless mask of a man realizing his dynasty was a forged medical document. Victoria did not speak. She kept her chin raised. Her dark eyes stared straight ahead, refusing to look at the man beside her. She gripped her designer clutch with white-knuckled force. Her silence was her confession. Donovan had dismantled his empire for a ghost. He deceived his wife for ambition. Victoria deceived him for equity. The karmic circle snapped shut around his throat, choking the life from his legendary career. The judgment continued to unfold. An older man in a tailored seersucker suit stood up from the front row. Judge Horace Vance possessed the same dark, calculating eyes as his niece. He carried 30 years of unblemished judicial history on his broad shoulders. He buttoned his jacket with slow, deliberate fingers. He did not raise his voice. He did not offer a dramatic monologue. "You are a disgrace to the bench, and you are no longer a Vance." He sat down. He did not look at her again. He severed her from her bloodline with a single sentence. Donovan scrambled toward the mahogany podium. The rubber soles of his expensive wingtips slipped against the damp marble. He caught himself against the wooden stairs. He hauled his weight up onto the stage. He gripped the edges of the wood, shoving Elias out of the frame. His knuckles turned stark white. Cold sweat beaded along his hairline. He opened his mouth to deploy his legendary courtroom baritone. He prepared to spin the narrative. He needed to blame the judge. He needed to cast himself as the victim of an elaborate, deceitful trap orchestrated by a corrupt woman. He needed the cameras to record his defense. "Listen to me." Nobody moved. Camera lenses lowered. Journalists flipped their spiral notepads shut. The caps of blue ballpoint pens clicked closed in unison. The remaining junior partners from his firm turned their backs, walking away from the stage toward the heavy oak doors. Donovan swallowed hard. The sharp click of his throat working echoed through the microphone. "I was manipulated." His voice cracked. It sounded small. It shattered against the vast, uncaring architecture of the room. He leaned further over the podium, desperate to catch a single sympathetic eye in the crowd. The 500 people in the ballroom stopped looking at him. They stared at their phones. They whispered to their colleagues. They looked at the melting ice swans. They treated him like a discarded prop on a theater stage. His words held no weight. His power held no currency. He became a ghost. Camille sat in the velvet chair in the center of the stage. She felt the warm, steady heartbeat of her newborn son against her collarbone. Leo was warm. Leo was alive. She smoothed the rough cotton hospital blanket over his small shoulders, making sure the harsh stage lights did not burn his closed eyelids. She looked out over the sprawling grand ballroom. She saw the melting ice dripping onto the imported linen. She saw her father standing guard near the velvet curtains. She saw the man who had tried to erase her standing, paralyzed behind a silent microphone. She placed her feet flat on the stage. She rose to her feet. Camille rose from the tufted velvet chair. The torn cream silk of her ruined maternity gown shifted against her scraped skin. She adjusted the coarse, institutional cotton hospital blanket over her chest. Leo Pierce, sterling, slept against her collarbone. He was a heavy, warm anchor holding her fragile bones to the earth. His tiny, translucent fingernails pressed into her bare skin. His small chest rose and fell in a rapid, bird-like flutter. He smelled of milk, iodine, and the faint scent of fresh rain. The grand ballroom of the Biltmore Hotel descended into a suffocating, breathless vacuum. 500 members of Atlanta's legal elite stared at the stage. The string quartet was long gone. The grand piano sat abandoned in the shadows. The towering ice swans in the center of the room dripped cold water onto the imported linen tablecloths in a slow, relentless tempo. Donovan stepped backward. His leather wingtip caught the thick edge of the plush red carpet. He stumbled. His midnight navy Tom Ford suit sagged across his broad shoulders. He looked at the front row of journalists. He saw only polished glass camera lenses reflecting his own pale, bloodless face. Nobody raised a pen. Nobody offered a sympathetic gaze. The heavy oak doors of the grand ballroom opened. They did not creak. They swung inward with a massive, rushing gust of pressurized air that fluttered the velvet curtains on the stage. 12 men and women stepped over the brass threshold. They wore dark navy windbreakers over heavy tactical belts. Bold yellow lettering spanned their broad shoulder blades. FBI. They moved with a terrifying synchronized grace, boots striking the marble in perfect unison. They bypassed the towering ice sculptures. They ignored the sea of tailored tuxedos. They marched down the center aisle with the rhythmic, heavy tread of an execution squad. The string quartet musicians in the corner lowered their instruments, resting their expensive cellos against the floor. Waiters froze, holding silver trays of untouched caviar. The entire ballroom held its breath. The agents surrounded the crimson Oscar de la Renta dress. Victoria Vance backed away from the mahogany podium. Her heavy gold bangles rattled against her dark wrists. The frantic, metallic clanking echoed through the microphone, amplifying her terror across the cavernous room. Her red stiletto slipped on the damp marble. She collided with the wooden stairs of the stage. "Judge Vance," the lead federal agent said. His voice carried no theatrical courtroom projection. It lacked the rehearsed cadence of the legal elite. It was flat. It was administrative. It sounded like a steel vault sliding shut. "You are under arrest for federal wire fraud, judicial extortion, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. I am the presiding district judge." Her voice shook. The predatory smirk was gone. She raised her chin, attempting to summon the unyielding authority of her courtroom bench. "You have no jurisdiction over me." The agent did not argue. He reached out. He gripped her bare wrist. He twisted her arm down toward the zipper of her crimson dress. The snap of the steel handcuffs echoed across the vast ballroom. The cold metal locked over the heavy gold bangles. The physical weight of the chains pulled her shoulders forward. She gasped. The sharp intake of air hissed through the silent crowd. The crimson fabric pulled around her knees as she lost her balance. Elias Thorne stepped out of the shadows. He raised his heavy professional camera. He adjusted the telephoto lens. He focused on the steel cuffs biting into the crimson silk. He pressed the shutter. The mechanical click sounded like a guillotine dropping. The journalists awoke from their paralyzed trance. 500 camera flashes erupted in unison. The strobe lights painted the ballroom in blinding, jagged white bursts. The press pit surged forward, crushing against the velvet ropes. They did not ask questions about Donovan's political campaign. They shouted about the forged medical records. They demanded statements about the $10,000 bribe handed to the Buckhead Clinic receptionist. 2 agents hauled Victoria forward. They paraded her back down the center aisle of the grand Biltmore ballroom. She dragged her red stilettos across the plush red carpet. The thick wool fibers caught the sharp heels, making her stumble. The sea of tailored tuxedos and glittering evening gowns parted before her. They did not make way out of respect. They shrank back, pulling their elbows in, desperate to avoid the radioactive fallout of her ruined career. Junior litigators who had begged for her favor just yesterday now turned their backs. Rival judges averted their eyes. Her diamond statement necklace caught the flashing strobe lights, illuminating the destruction of her false empire. She looked at the floorboards. A bead of sweat ruined the flawless makeup on her forehead. She caused her own destruction. Her boundless greed built the trap. Her fraudulent pregnancy supplied the rope. She vanished through the heavy oak doors, swallowed by the flashing lights of the hallway press pool. She left behind only the scent of Tom Ford Black Orchid perfume and the fading, pathetic echo of rattling gold. Camille smoothed her thumb over her son's dark hair. Leo shifted against her sternum. He let out a soft, breathy sigh. He remained safe beneath the coarse cotton fabric. She protected him from the blinding flashes. She shielded his tiny eyes from the brutal mechanics of the world tearing his father apart. The newborn weighed nearly 7 pounds, pressing a steady, comforting heat into her collarbone. Every tiny rise and fall of his chest synced with her own breathing. He anchored her to the earth. He reminded her why she had endured the cold marble floor 10 hours earlier. Arthur Sterling struck the marble floor with his silver cane. The sharp, concussive crack silenced the remaining journalists. The shouting ceased. The camera flashes stopped. The elite tactical operative standing near the velvet curtains closed his reinforced magnesium laptop. The glowing blue light vanished from his harsh jawline. He stepped to the edge of the elevated stage. He held a printed sheet of heavy cream stationery in his large, calloused hand. The paper bore the gold-embossed crest of the Sterling Justice Center. The board of directors for Pierce and Associates convened an emergency vote 3 minutes ago, the operative announced. His voice boomed through the ballroom speakers, overriding the chaotic murmurs of the press pit. The hostile corporate takeover initiated by the Sterling Justice Center is complete. Donovan froze. The muscles in his neck turned to rigid stone. The vein pulsing along his left temple became starkly visible beneath his dark skin. "The firm is officially dissolved," the operative continued, reading the legal execution without a shred of emotion. "The commercial lease on the Peachtree Street high-rise is terminated. Maintenance staff are currently scraping the brass lettering from the lobby walls with putty knives. All client files have been seized by federal regulators pending a massive embezzlement audit of the Cayman Island shell corporations." The operative folded the thick paper. He slid it into the tactical pocket of his black Kevlar vest. He looked down at the lawyer standing on the scuffed marble. "You are unemployed, Mr. Pierce. You are unbanked. You are unhoused." Donovan shook his head. A bead of cold sweat rolled down his dark temple, soaking into the starched white collar of his tailored shirt. He wiped his palms against the side of his midnight navy trousers. He looked at the mahogany podium where he had stood like a king that morning. He looked at the melting ice sculptures pooling water onto the imported linen. He looked at the remaining junior partners from his firm sprinting toward the rear exits, abandoning him to the wolves. His world shrank to the size of the stage. The power he had wielded for a decade evaporated into the humid ballroom air. The remaining 4 FBI agents stepped onto the mahogany stage. They surrounded the midnight navy suit. "I built this firm from nothing." His first line was frantic. The lead agent did not flinch. He grabbed Donovan's shoulder. He forced the lawyer's arm behind his back with brutal, practiced efficiency. The crisp Tom Ford wool stretched and tore at the shoulder seam. "Donovan Pierce, you are under arrest for domestic asset shielding, federal conspiracy, and grand larceny." Donovan twisted his neck. He looked past the federal agent. He stared at the exact center of the stage. He saw the torn cream silk pooling around Camille's calves. He saw the tiny, wrapped shape resting against her collarbone. He saw the son he had tried to steal. "Let me hold him." His second line bled into the cold air. Camille did not move. She did not tighten her grip on the baby. She let the vast, crushing silence answer him. She watched him drown in the ocean he had demanded. The agent kicked the back of Donovan's knee. Donovan collapsed. He hit the floor. The heavy impact drove the breath from his lungs in a ragged wheeze. The scuffed marble tiles bit into his kneecaps. The grout line pressed against his shins. He knelt in the exact spot where Camille had fallen that morning. The floor smelled of chemical wax, damp wool, and the coppery tang of melting ice. The ratcheting click of the steel handcuffs echoed in his ears. The cold metal bit into his wrists, pinning his arms together behind his back. The steel mechanism pinched his skin. He looked up, his line of sight leveled with the stage floorboards. He saw the jagged tear in the delicate cream silk of her maternity gown. He saw the dried mud caking her bruised shin. He saw the scuffed red sole of her single remaining Louboutin shoe. He saw the physical evidence of his own cruelty hovering inches above his face. The thick edge of the plush red carpet still protruded from the floorboards. He tilted his head back. He looked past the torn dress. He looked into her dark, unreadable eyes. Camille. His third line was a hollow whisper. Camille looked down at the man kneeling on the marble. She felt the slow, steady heartbeat of her newborn son pulsing against her chest. Leo was warm. Leo was alive. The baby anchored her to the present moment, shielding her from the ghosts of her 4-year marriage. The child needed a mother made of iron. She did not feel anger. She did not feel the burning rush of vindication. She felt only the cold, unyielding weight of a closed door. She adjusted the rough hospital blanket over the baby's tiny shoulders. She met Donovan's eyes. "He will never know your name." She spoke quietly. The microphone did not catch the words. The journalists did not record the sentence. She delivered the final judgment directly to the marrow of his bones. It was a fact, decided hours ago in a dark subterranean hospital room. She turned away. She did not look back at the kneeling man. She did not look at the federal agents securing his chains. She did not look at the flashing cameras waiting in the press pit. She held her newborn tight against her chest. She stepped down from the elevated stage. She walked forward. Donovan jerked his shoulders. He tried to stand. He tried to follow the torn cream silk disappearing into the crowd of parted journalists. He could not rise. The sharp, unforgiving steel edge of the handcuff bit deep into his wrist bone, locking him to the floor. She carried her son into the warmth of a quiet, unwritten morning. Condensation dripped down the silver ice bucket.